the Doc Talk Podcast. Good to have you along. A quick reminder for you, if you are watching this video right now, go ahead and give it a like because, well, likes help us out and it lets us know that you like us. If you have any comments of what you hear today on the podcast, go ahead and leave your comment. And most of all, subscribe to the channel. Dr. Rob and myself will be putting out content the rest of this year and, of course, all next year. And when you subscribe, you'll know right away when that content comes out. Let's bring in the good doctor, Dr. Rob Zatechka. And Dr. Rob, a little different today because Owen decided to go and be in a wedding and he's out of town and our production facilities. Yeah, I know. I mean, can you believe that, my son who gives his time to us every week and goes, I got something to do. So we find a way though, right?
So I'm going to be curious to see how this works. It's always a little production sketch when Owen's gone.
Yeah, because it's a much better production.
Not that I don't trust you. I'm just saying.
No, I get that.
I'm just saying the guy's a professional.
Just to let you know, my wife and kids were really happy that you stopped by yesterday. They haven't seen you forever. So you came by the house, you had a couple beers, and you saw the stock of fridge that we have for when we get the studio done, how much beer we actually have to drink.
There's so much. Like, I'm not going to go to, I didn't realize it was that much. Like, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm not going to a bar anymore. Not that I go to bars a lot, but it's just kind of not my scene. But I'm sitting here thinking, screw that. I'm just going to go to your house and hang out.
Yeah, we got beers from Missouri, Arkansas, California. Yeah, we got beers from all over the country, which they're just being waiting patiently in a fridge. Whenever we get the studio done, hopefully within the first 3 months of 2025, we'll be ready to go. I put this out on your Twitter account the other day, and yes, I do have access to Dr. Rob's Twitter account. It's only for special announcements, but we talk about.
If you see a tweet and you just don't get it, it's from Trav.
Yes, most definitely. But we've been talking about G-Defy shoes all season long, and they gave a great Christmas deal. I got an email from Sean Scott from G-Defy on Friday. He says, "Hey, for your listeners, can you let them know they can get 50% off a pair of G-Defy? 50% by using
I'm getting a new pair of G-Defys.
Yes, all you have to use is the promo code DocTalk50. That's DocTalk50 at checkout and get 50% off between now and Christmas Day. So you got till December 25th to get 50% off. If you don't know about G-Defy shoes, Dr. Rob wears them in surgery. I wear them when I'm walking around the office. They're great for your feet. They alleviate that pain. They have that VersoShock technology. And
that's a great deal.
50% off is a big, big deal.
And that's currently ongoing as of right now.
As of right now, you can use
should I order a pair right now during the show?
Not during the show. You can wait till we're done, but it's Doc Talk 50. All one word, and of course, all caps. That's Doc Talk 50 to get your G-Defy shoes. We are recording this on Sunday afternoon. The college football playoff selection show just wrapped up, Dr. Rob, and maybe the biggest surprise out of the whole thing is that Alabama got knocked out of the playoff. SMU stays in after losing the ACC title game. That means the Big Ten has 4 teams. The SEC has 3 teams. The ACC has 2 teams. The Big 12 has 1 team, 1 independent in Notre Dame, and the Mountain West in Boise State, which got a first-round bye, has 1 team. Any surprises in the announcement?
I would have thought, I'm not super surprised about the Alabama one because I think a lot of people said it was sort of the whole, okay, if ESPN has a say in this, Alabama's in. If they really go by the teams, their resumes, their records, then it's going to be, then it's going to be SMU. So I'm not sure it was a huge surprise, a little bit of a surprise. Controversy for sure. And the reason I say controversy is because, again, you go into the, how good are these individual teams? Resume is one thing. How good they are is another. I mean, you can have a great resume, doesn't mean you're a great team. And so I kind of go back to, so we do the weekly show with Scott Spreitzer out of Vegas. He's a Vegas handicapper, which, it sounds way seedier than it is. The guy is a data analyst for sports books.
True. That's what he is.
I mean, that's what he does. He looks at all these numbers. He does the data analysis. And he has said that from the beginning, all of these committees, all of these playoff selection committees, whether it's basketball, whether it's college football, they need basically a handicapper type data analyst on the committee to be given some thoughts here in terms. And I think people look at them and they go like, okay, well, we don't want Vegas involved in this. Well, the weird thing is that when it comes to crunching these numbers, nobody's better at it and nobody is more unbiased about it than fucking Vegas.
100%.
That's who knows the numbers. Give them a little bit of say in this. And I think that would make a huge difference in terms of how people view. Scott always says it's the power rankings or the strength rankings that these teams have. And he said on a given day, if you're going to match up SMU against Alabama, who's probably going to win that game 8 out of 10 times? It's probably going to be Alabama.
Yeah.
I mean, did they get upset by Vandy? Yes. Did they have teams like Mercer on their schedule? I totally get it. Did I think talented but underperforming Oklahoma team nuke Alabama and Norman? Yes. That made Oklahoma's season, by the way. But I understand the resume's not there. But that doesn't mean Alabama's not necessarily the better team, and they probably are. And it hurts me to say that. Do I think the committee made the right decision? Yeah, it's kind of one of those, well, two things can be true at once. Yeah, they made the right decision. Should Alabama have been in the playoff? Yeah, they probably should have been. Well, but that also kind of goes back to my argument that I keep thinking we need a bigger playoff.
Well, and we'll get into that because I think there's a lot of lessons learned here. And that is what I don't like are how the guaranteed buys, right? Because you have Boise State with a bye. You have Arizona State with a bye. If you're going to have a ranking 1 through 12, then just seed it 1 through 12. That's the easiest way to do it. I understand you got to have the highest ranked conference champion in there, but Arizona State, being the 12 seed, should not get a first round bye because technically it's the 4 seed, right? I mean, that doesn't make sense to me.
I do agree with that. And I see a lot of people. I mean, there's lots of models out there right now on how to run a playoff. And I know a few people have pointed out to me on Twitter earlier today that, just do it like the pros. Now you got to be a little bit careful with that. And I mean, I'm being a little bit obtuse here. Where I'm like, all right, well, in the NFL, almost 44% of the teams make the playoff. You don't want to put 44% of FBS schools in the playoff because that's over 50 teams. So you can't do that. But I do like some of the stuff that the NFL does that they do seed everybody. And when you look at those 14 teams that make the NFL playoff, I mean, a good example, and again, I'm pulling from personal experience. I'm not trying to live in the 90s, although this is 1997 New York Giants. We were the division winners. We won the division. That's kind of the college football equivalent of winning your conference. We won our division. Well, it wasn't a great year in the NFC East. Dallas was having a little bit of a down year. So that's an okay record. Even by NFL standards, that's pretty mediocre. But we were the division champs. I got plenty of division championship gear still in a big giant plastic storage tub somewhere. But yeah, we were the division champs. Guess what game we opened the playoffs with?
Were you a wild card team?
Wild card. We were the wild card matchup. We were the division winner, but we had to play one of the wild card teams. And so I get it. And do you know why? Because they seed the whole thing. It doesn't matter if you're the division champ or a wild card team, you're going to get seeded. And if you're a division champ and you're 9-7, guess what? That's not a very good seed. And so guess what? You get one of the wild card games. You don't get a first round bye. So I totally agree with you. Seed the whole thing. And I think that's the way to do it. I'm a little surprised they didn't do it that way. But I think it's way fair to say, hey, we're going to seed everything from top to bottom and go from there.
You know, it's interesting. You put out there on Twitter today that the easy way to solve this would be go to 20 teams. I think we're going to see an expansion sooner or later. I think and next year is like we got one more year of this, and then 2026 everything's kind of redone again. Do you think they go to 16, 20, or 24 teams?
Boy, that's a good question, because at first I'd say like, okay, well, we've moved at a snail's pace at this point, but we jumped from 4 to 12. That's a pretty big jump. And there was a great article, might have been Athlon. I got to go back and look at it, where they talked about kind of like all the players, all the decision makers who came up with the concept of the 12-team playoff, and how they feel like they just nailed it, like just hit the nail on the head, like couldn't like this. It was serendipitous. It was so perfect. And now I'm sitting here thinking like, yeah, we need minimum 16, 20 would be way fucking better. Now I go back to like 2014, and I'm sitting here thinking, watching the playoffs that year going, okay, there's no way this stays at 4 teams for more than a couple of years before this expands. Took a decade for it to expand. And some of these decision makers don't like being told, yeah, we didn't get it right the first time or the second time even. I don't think they like that logic. So I think it's going to take a while. And so if they do expand, I think it goes to 16 next. But when I keep looking at it, I'm looking at teams that I do think could do some damage in an expanded playoff. And I'm looking at somebody say, like on a really good day, Miami, and I've said all along, Miami's a pretender. And I really do believe that. Alabama's a great example. That's a good football team. That's just because Nick Saban's gone, Caleb DeBoer's a pretty good coach. Let him get his system established a little bit. That's going to be a really good program going forward. There's a team that still has guys on the roster that are used to playoff football. How about Iowa State? Well, I totally bag on Matt Campbell all the time. It's a good team. There's a team that, there's a team that, by the way, big thank you to Jason Werner. I popped one open for the playoffs. Nice. Iowa State's a team that I could see sneaking in there and doing some damage in the first round or two, which if all of a sudden you do that, now you're eyeing the semifinals and people are like, ooh, how did these guys get seated so low?
Let me ask you this. What is more important? Is it record or is it strength of schedule? They were talking about this on ESPN, because I could probably give you several 4-loss teams that I think could beat SMU, right? So what matters more, and where do you find the happy medium between record and strength of schedule?
Okay, I'm going to rephrase your question a little bit here. And again, I'm going back to the school of Scott Spreitzer, where I'm going to toss out strength of schedule and just say, how about power ratings or power rankings? Whichever one you want to go with. Let's take the data analysts and put together, okay, who's the better team? At the end of the day, who's the better team? And at the end of the day, you go to that, and that's not a schedule thing. That's not a record thing. That's a strength of schedule type thing. That's a power ranking kind of thing. And I think that's why I think Scott's right. I think they're doing a disservice to the sport by not having some kind of data analyst on board crunching these numbers and saying, hey, if you want to look at who is actually the better team on paper at any given point in time, here's the numbers. And they're using some of that. So it's not like this is a foreign concept to these people on the committee. You've got Sagarin ratings, you've got strength of schedule rankings. So they're using this information. It's just they're barely scratching the surface of it. And I think as time goes on, and one of the things I talked about on Twitter this morning was you look at the parity in college football right now and what NIL and the portal have done to parity with these teams and how fast we've seen these changes happen. You got a Georgia team that was this close to being a 3-loss team. You got a 3-loss Alabama team out there that probably almost made the playoff. I guarantee you that somebody was probably flipping a coin in that room going, who do we let in? Fuck, is it going to be SMU or is it going to be Alabama? And you end up going with SMU. And I think it's the right choice. If Alabama got in, I wouldn't have been totally pissed about it either. So but I think you got to have that data analysis, and I think you got to go way deeper than what they're currently doing with it. And that's why I look at the expansion. And you mentioned, I made the comment about we need to expand it. I think a lot of people are looking at that comment and going, okay, well, Rob's throwing a quick fix answer out there. Okay, we'll just expand it to 20 teams. Simple, problem solved. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you're going to see the parity is going to become more and more apparent here, where you look at, if you look at the top teams, let's take Oregon out of the mix because they ran the table and had a I know Penn State scored late. There was a 2-score win over Penn State, if you really want to get down to brass tacks here. Oregon looks really, really good. I want to see Oregon against Georgia or Texas, though, at some point here. But that's a really good Oregon team. So we're going to take them out. Outside of Oregon, is there anybody that you look at and go, okay, here's who's going to go farthest in this playoff? Well, Georgia's got some losses. Texas.
I look at the entire 12
Texas defense is amazing. You got to get Arch Manning back in there. Ewers just ain't it. That O-line for Texas, Spreitzer was right. That O-line's a little bit of a weakness for the Longhorns.
I look at the 12-team field, and Oregon let Penn State score late last night, but I don't know if Oregon's going to win the national championship. You got Clemson against Texas, Tennessee against Ohio State. That's a hell of a game. SMU against
that's the tough matchup. They're both. If I'm those two teams, I'm sitting there like, really, we got to play each other.
SMU, Penn State, Indiana, Notre Dame. Indiana,
Notre Dame, I think, is a great matchup. I think that one's really interesting to me. The Texas. The Tennessee game. That's another one of those where I'm looking at and I'm thinking, God, this is a really great matchup. I think Texas got a great first round draw. Even second round, I think Texas is is looking good. And I thought Penn State got a great first round matchup. Outside of that, though, man, it's some tough matchups.
We were talking about strength of schedule. We were also talking about record. There has been discussion of going back to the data point, not necessarily with a handicapper, but going back to a BCS type of poll where the computer takes all the data and then comes up with a ranking and you take a committee out of it. Would you rather have the human element out of it like this and let a BCS type poll decide who those top 12 teams are?
I do think you have to have both. And again, God, I keep mentioning Spreitzer. Scott made the point that he said there's days where you look at the data and you look at the analysis of it, just the pure numbers, and go, okay, I'm not betting on this. This isn't a good bet. And so I think you've got to have a little bit of human element there, because I do think there's a good thing that comes from that. But I like what the BCS did in terms of taking multiple. It's easy to say they spit this into a computer and had a computer analyze all this. What they did is they took whatever it was, 7 different polls, and had a computer come up with, okay, well, what's the average of all of this? What's the amalgamation of all of these polls, and have that spit out the rankings. And so people could basically say, okay, we kind of know what the formula is. Everybody was usually able to pick what teams were going to make it, in the 2 teams that were going to make it into the BCS. From the standpoint that it's multiple polls, you got to keep in mind that's people.
Yeah.
I mean, there was, I think, like two. I mean, Sagarin was one, but there was like 2 or 3 different computer polls, and then it was like 4 or 5 human polls. There was human voting that went into that BCS ranking. So you got to keep in mind there is a human element there in that. And I mean, if it comes in the form of human-based rankings like AP poll, coaches poll, et cetera, versus doing like if it's a deal where you're doing, I'm trying to think of way to phrase it, more like a committee and doing a playoff committee, then I guess I look at that as well, that it's one of those things that you can do it that way as well too. Either way, I guess the bottom line of what I'm trying to say is that there ought to be some kind of human element in it. And if you don't have that human element, I think you're taken away from the total picture, because it can't be just pure numbers and pure data analysts, but I think you got to have the data analysis side of it too.
Yeah, what I like about the human element is the eye test, right? Because a computer cannot just watch 2 teams, because there is something to the eye test. I can watch a team and go, "Oh, you're better." Like I watched Miami this year. You and I are on the same page. I thought that Miami was a pretender all year long. They never passed my eye test. So when Miami's getting left out of this poll or this playoff, I'm like, I'm okay with it, because they never just really impressed me, right? An eye test has to be a part of it.
It does. And I mean, now there's a whole ACC eye test here thing too, where I know people are talking about like, well, okay, so-and-so lost to so-and-so, so Clemson managed to get into the ACC title game and win it. And then you got SMU that has a great comeback and then loses on a walk-off field goal at the end. How good are either one of these teams?
True.
So, I mean, you've got two ACC teams that do either of them pass the eyeball test? So
no.
Yeah, they really don't. Now, but this is also one of those things. Then I look at Notre Dame and I'm like, God, you look at their schedule. Do they pass the eyeball test?
Well, yeah,
probably better than the 2 ACC teams. That's also one of these situations where then I look at Notre Dame and go, I want those guys in a conference. I'm kind of tired of having the lone wolf out there who gets into the mix here, and it's hard to judge them against everybody else.
Now,
I think
they play a pretty good schedule, though. I would agree with you if they didn't play a good schedule. They play a good schedule.
Yeah, I will give you that. I think the schedule for Notre Dame is solid. That being said, I'm kind of at the point, though, just jump into the ACC. Because here's the thing. Let's say Notre Dame was in the ACC. They're probably ACC champs.
I would agree with that, yes. And they'd get a first-round bye, because they can't get a first-round bye right now.
Exactly. I think it's better for Notre Dame, and I think it's better for the overall picture of how this is currently structured. I mean, they went 11-1. I think they're a very good team. Join a guy. I would love to see somebody come down and just say, okay, you know what? We're going to buck all of the Golden Dome or alumni, and we're going to say, if you're going to be in the playoff, you got to be in a conference.
You know, I mean, the collective is usually better than one, but I think even the SEC, the Big Ten, everybody understands the value that Notre Dame brings, right? So the reason they're included.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, there's value there, a lot of value.
There is, and that's why they're in this picture right now. But that value still exists in a conference.
Yeah, I think their value. They think their value goes down if they're in the conference. I think their road gets tougher if they're in the SEC, the Big Ten, maybe, and even the ACC. If they were to go in the
ACC, I think they own the ACC right now.
Yeah, right now they would. But if Florida State gets better, if Clemson maintains, then you're not guaranteed so much. But the ACC then might be in a position to where it could be in that 3 or 4 team type conversation, right?
Okay, here's a question for you. Let's say Notre Dame has 2 losses.
They're not in.
There you go. I mean, it's like, and now here's the thing. I could see them having 2 losses and winning the ACC title game.
That's different. Then you're in. But if they were,
then you're in.
Yeah, and then you're in.
It's better for Notre Dame.
They knew what they were doing. I mean, they purposely gave up the possibility of a first round bye, knowing that if they got to a 1-win situation or a 1-loss situation, that they were going to be in. They kind of controlled their own destiny. There will be little leeway though with Notre Dame when it comes to maybe 2 or 3 losses. They'll never get the benefit of the doubt that like an Alabama did with a 3-loss season.
And that I agree with, but that's also why I think ultimately, I mean, at some point in a newer structure here, at some point over the next couple of years, which I hope they do restructure this, or at least if they stay at 12 teams, God forbid, I hope they redo the breakdown on how they do the rules for this.
Yeah, I think we learned that people aren't a big fan of the rules. You're going to have to simplify it a little bit more. If you do go to a 20 or 24 team, how far off, because in the NCAA basketball tournament, the conference tournament champions, or in some cases conference champions, get an automatic bid. How far down do you go? Do you go to the MAC? Do you go to Conference USA? Do you go to the Sun Belt? Where do you cut off the automatic? Because I think Mountain West would be in there. Maybe the future Pac-12 would be in there. But how far down do you go for automatic bids?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, that's kind of why I like the whole idea of seeding the whole thing.
But you can do that. You can do that, but do you give somebody an automatic bid? If you're at 24 teams, say, hey, Sun Belt, you're getting a team. Or are we going, why is a Sun Belt team in there?
See, but if you seed the whole thing you've got a Sun Belt team that's, let's say it's a 20-team playoff.
Yeah.
If you got a Sun Belt team that's seeded 18th, they're in. But remove the automatic bids.
So that was my question. So you're saying no automatic bids. So if you're not in that top, so nobody automatically
gets in. I'm not an automatic bid guy. No, I mean here's how you got to do it if you're going to do automatic bids.
Okay.
And this goes back to the whole like if you want to do it like the NFL does it. So everybody's like, well, just do it like the NFL does it. The NFL does it, but everything is super uniform. I mean, you've got 4 8-team divisions. You've got 2 16-team conferences. Whoever wins their division gets an automatic bid, and then you go from there. But it's this incredibly well-defined, laid-out system. I mean, I don't even know anymore. Was it 20 teams in the Big Ten right now?
18.
18. How many are in the SEC?
What is it, 16?
Do you have any clue how many teams are in the Big 12?
What is it, 14, I believe. 14 or 16?
Yeah, who's going to be in the new Pac-12?
Well, right now they don't have enough to field a football conference. So
exactly. How many Mountain West teams are there?
I can't even tell you anymore.
MAC.
Can't tell you. I know there's enough for divisions, but
Sun Belt.
I don't even go there because
AAC.
Yeah, I have no idea because I don't pay attention.
You understand what I'm saying?
100%.
There's no structure. That's my point. There's no structure to it right now. And so it's doing this whole, if you don't have that well-defined structure, then there is no place to do, hey, we're going to do top 4 get an automatic bid, or we're going to go to 20 teams, top 8 get an automatic bid, or we're going to go to 20 teams and conference champs get an automatic bid. It's okay. There's no well-defined, equalized structure in college football like there is in the NFL. That's an apples to oranges comparison. And so that's why until you get that really well-defined, equalized structure, having automatic bids does not make sense.
So
just come up with who's your top 20 seeds, do that. And out of those top 20, basically I'm saying seed everybody, rank everybody. That's all seeding is. It's a ranking, but seed everybody. And then you do first round buys based off of that seeding. It's not an automatic.
So basically what I hear you saying, because the NFL has 32 teams, right? So
32.
So do you go just get rid of the conferences, go 60 teams, 80 teams, divide those into divisions, and then you can kind of put an NFL type structure together, right?
Yeah, and I mean, that got talked about when it was looking like we were going to end. I mean, for a while there, until the Big 12 and the ACC kind of worked some TV deals, worked some money on that, and Big 12 went through the whole quality by quantity method. Up until that point, it looked like we were going to end up having, this is going to turn into a college football playoff division, and then we'll have a college football playoff division, and then we'll have a D1 division, and then it'll be FCS, D2, D3. There was going to be a whole other, for the better part of a year, we talked about how there was going to be the CFP division of basically it was going to be the Big Ten and the SEC, and Big Ten and SEC were going to swoop in and maybe pick up like your Kansas, K-State, Iowa State. We'll grab Texas Tech, Okie State, TCU, and Baylor, and put together this college football playoff division. That's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about this well-defined equalized structure, that it was basically going to be, we're going to come up with a Big Ten and an SEC. They're going to have essentially near equal numbers. We'll get Florida State and Miami in there. We'll try and be nice and throw some of the ACC people like the Virginia schools and Clemson in there. And then everybody else gets to go be just FBS D1. We're going to have a college playoff. Yeah, we're going to have a college football playoff division, an FBS division, FCS D2, D3. That was what we were talking about as recently as like 6 to 9 months ago.
Yeah.
And so that would be the way to, and what we had talked about in that is, then we're going to restructure it. You're going to have 20 teams in each in two divisions. You're going to have 10 teams from each, so you'll have 20 total teams making the playoff. We'll go from there. And so that would be workable from an NFL type model, but you've got to equalize everything, and you'd have to break off and probably have some kind of equalized college football playoff division then, if you're going to do that. And I still think that's totally a possibility. That still could happen because if you look at this, the SEC and the Big Ten are still the main power players here.
Very much so.
It's not like their decision making hasn't gone away here. These are the people still pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Before we move on from the playoff, though, when you look at the 12 teams that are in, what I like about the first year of the 12-team playoff, it's wide open. I really do believe I don't think SMU can win this thing. I don't think Clemson can, but I don't think Boise State can. But I think there's a lot of teams in here who can win this whole damn thing.
No, I totally agree with you, but that's kind of where I talked about. You look at this parity and how this parity is spread throughout. I think we're going to be looking at this from a discussionary standpoint, because right now the discussion is SMU versus Alabama and who's the better team. And I think a lot of people are looking at it like, God, is Texas that much better than Alabama? And I'm really not sure they are. Is Georgia that much better than Texas? is Ohio State that much better than whoever?
Tennessee. I mean, that's who they're playing, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you've got so much parity right now in this particular league. It's hard to really pin these teams down in terms of who's truly all that good. Like, who's the runaway winner here? I mean, over the last several years, it's been easy to pick up until maybe last year, where all of a sudden you saw it was Washington and Michigan in the national title game. And so I think you're only going to see that parity is going to spread more and more, quicker and quicker. I think it's going to happen really fast. And the discussion is going to be, it's not so much, okay, who should be the final 2 teams in, the final 5 teams in? It's going to be like, hey, we got this 17th, this team that's currently seeded or ranked 17th. God, their margin to the 3rd ranked team is going to be like this.
Yeah, very much so.
And so that's when you got to have the expansion. That's why I keep saying expand this thing, because you're going to have teams that are, you're going to rank them out, you're going to seed them, and they're going to be sitting at 19th, 20th, 21st in the nation. And they're going to have an argument that, like, hey, we think we're better than the 5th ranked team. And they might be right. But that's why you expand it, is because when you get that kind of parity, if you have a smaller playoff, you're really limiting that. You're limiting the opportunity of these teams who probably do, I hate using the word deserves, but you're probably limiting the opportunity for some of these teams that deserve to be in a playoff.
Hey, don't forget, we're coming up on the holiday season. If you're looking for a holiday gift for the Husker fan in your family, go to Husker Hounds, 2 locations in the Omaha area and online at huskerhounds.com. Scotty Strunk's going to have all sorts of bowl gear for you. So we're going to talk about the bowl game in a little bit. So if you want to be dressed up for... Oh, my computer's going off in here. Can you believe that? But somebody's calling my wife's computer.
Somebody's FaceTiming.
Yeah, I have no idea who that is, but they're probably calling my wife, and I forgot that it goes off in the kitchen. But Husker Hounds, Scotty's got everything you need, not just for the bowl game, but for your holiday gifts, whether you want a polo, a sweatshirt, a corn head, an ornament for your tree, all sorts of good stuff. So make sure to check it out. Support our sponsors, because Scotty is one of the biggest Husker fans we know, and he would love to see you stop by and make sure to say, hey, I heard Travis and Rob talking about you on the podcast. And also make sure to, if you need legal representation, check out our good friend Connor Orr at the Orr Law Group. You can go to orlawgrp.com, litigation, estate planning, and his practice is expanding. So make sure to check out the website, orlawgrp.com. Or if you want to talk to Connor directly, just send him an email, connor@orlawgrp.com. That's for the legal advice and legal representation that you need. Dr. Rob and I were hoping to record this podcast when the Nebraska Bowl game had been announced. Nothing has been announced officially yet, Rob, but it's pointing towards, and we could be wrong, so if you're listening to this and go, that's not where they went, it's pointing towards the Pinstripe Bowl and Yankee Stadium and the Hal Steinbrenner's trophy.
Thought you were going to see the house that Ruth built.
Oh, well, not that one's gone now because they tore down the original Yankee Stadium, and
true.
It's a new one.
I am checking the matchups here, which, as we're going, looks like they're only down the Cure Bowl and the Gasparilla Bowl. Hawaii Bowl selected. Yep, nothing yet for the Pinstripe. So
Sporting News, and again, at the time of this recording, Sporting News has Nebraska playing Virginia Tech. Again, nothing official here, so don't yell at us when you watch it on the replay, but it's going to most likely be an ACC team. Do you like going to New York? It's not guaranteed to be great weather, but you a good opponent.
I'll take anybody. I'll take any place, anybody at this point, because I think the bigger thing is, and God, and I've been preaching this forever now at this point, that it's getting to a bowl game. It's getting that extra almost a month's worth of practice. It's getting that extra time together. It's the media coverage. It's being able to tell recruits, hey, we're making it to the postseason finally. We're making strides. We're making steps. There's a direction we're going now, and we can point that out and say, like, hey, here's proof we're moving in a positive direction. I think that's the most important thing that comes out of this. Where they go and who they play is just a little bit of an afterthought in my mind. But like I said, I'll take anybody. I'll take any place. Just get us to a damn bowl game.
Well, you're there, so, and we'll talk about, of course, now, the game and the opponent a lot more coming up the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Now, would I have preferred a place where, I mean, Husker fans love to travel to Florida. They love to travel to
Arizona,
New Orleans. They love to travel to Texas. They love to travel to California. I mean, Arizona. I mean, I would definitely take a bowl game that involves a warm weather site where there's a whole bunch of Husker fans currently living, because there's a lot of people leave Nebraska at some point and go to places south. So it would have been nice to go to some place south. And I mean, like, I know it was definitely not going to happen this year. I would have loved to see Nebraska to go to the Alamo Bowl. A couple more wins is what it probably would have taken. But
so we won't.
Nebraska fans travel well, and I think. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, we won't spend a lot of time talking about the bowl game. No, you're right about the travel thing, and even New York. Could you find a more expensive place to go? Probably not, because New York City's really, really expensive. Rob might be able to give you.
Stay in Jersey.
Yeah, you can go stay in Jersey. But you mentioned the big thing about the bowl game is it's that mental thing. You get to a bowl game, you get the practice time. The thing that is going to hurt this bowl game is a lot of it has happened in the transfer portal since we last recorded last week. So unless these guys come out of the portal, they're not going to be playing in the bowl game. And
correct.
There's a lot of names in this portal, Rob. Anybody that surprised you? I mean, Jamari Butler, Malachi Coleman, Gabe Irvin's in there. Any big surprises in that portal?
So there's a difference between surprises and like what hurts. And like surprises, no.
Emmett Johnson?
Yeah, that one maybe a little bit, although I mean it's one of those things where when you look at the portal right now, I'm like Googling Huskers in.
Just go to our good friends at huskermax.com, and there's a portal tracker right there on HuskerMax, because HuskerMax has it all. Of course, HuskerMax distributes this podcast, and we thank David Max and Joe Hudson for doing that.
So I mean,
he's taking a good hard look at it.
Well, I am, because I'm looking at guys who like have hopped in the portal this goes back like months. So I'm like, what? Chuba Purdy's in the transfer portal?
Are you on the wrong one?
Like the ones that I look at, I mean, Jamari Butler is a big one. That one that one stings. And it might hit your computer's ringing again.
Yeah, I know.
Give me 1 second here. Like, I'm pulling up Husker Max. I think they do have the best.
Yeah, because they got a tracker right there.
So, give me 1 second. I want to make sure I'm accurate here. Butler did not surprise me, just because I kind of figured when
Tony White,
when the defensive coaches left. Yeah, that was Butler was the guy that I thought would be that was the first guy that I thought would kind of go follow those guys. So
did you find the tracker? It's right there on the left-hand side. It says portal tracker. Husker Max.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I got the in terms of the guys Butler, not a surprise, but that one hurts. Coleman, wasn't super surprised when he hit the portal. Reg year, but he didn't even get any playing time as a redshirt. So I think he's a guy that they truly look at as a developmental guy. And so that's one that didn't really surprise me. In terms of, again, there, that one hurts. Davon Hall. So he was a true freshman this year. I don't know if that one stings all that much. He was a guy that he was a Bellevue West kid who just kind of started getting some 5 offers as a freshman kind of guy. But then you just never really saw it play out on the field. And I watched him play high school. I watched him in multiple games. He was just never the guy that made the play. So I'm not super surprised there. Emmett Johnson, again, that one kind of stings. That one is a little bit of a surprise. Dane Kalen, not surprised. Everybody saw that one coming. James Williams, that one hurts. That one hurts bad. Given that, now here's a question. Has it been officially announced that Terrence Knighton is officially going with White?
Yeah, Tony White's gone, Terrence Knighton gone, and now Evan Cooper's gone. Evan Cooper left. That announcement came out. So you got 3 of those defensive coaches that are gone. So Terrence Knighton leaving, that was one where when that happened, all of a sudden that makes Williams leaving not super surprising. Those guys I kind of figured they were kind of tied at the hip. I really liked Vincent Jackson as a player and thought he was a really good football player as well. It was a guy that was going to do a lot of damage on the D for Nebraska. Again, I hate using the word surprise. I like more the what hurts and what doesn't. Vincent Jackson, Johnson hurts, Gabayer hurts, Jamari Butler hurts. Those are the losses that I look at. I'm just like, oh, not those guys. But I get it. It's not surprising to me. Like all of those names are guys that I look at when you look at Terrence Knighton, when you look at White. Those are guys that they don't surprise me that they're hitting the transfer portal, because any more players are so tied to coaches. It's not the school, it's the coaches. A lot of stuff that came up this week of people like, and I think Adam Carricker put out there, should like players be under contract? Well, they are under contract. They're under contract with the NIL, but you're not going to get a multi-year contract until you have collective bargaining. So, and that's what I pointed out to Adam. I said, like the pros, you had the union on your side when it came to this stuff. If you want multi-year contracts for money, you need to collective bargaining. It needs to work out best for the universities. It needs to work out best for the players. It's not going to be right now it's pretty one-sided for the players, right? They get paid. They can go wherever they want. If you want multi-year contracts, you're going to need to collective bargain. And I don't know if anybody wants that in college football.
I think the schools would love it.
Now they would, yeah.
I really do. I just, again, we've got a system here that it kind of feels like it's been around for a while, but it hasn't. I mean, we're 4 years into this? So, transfer portals existed for longer than 4 years.
Yeah.
Wasn't that like 2018?
The explosion has really been the last couple of years, right? The explosion of it kind of went hand in hand. Once you start putting money out there, the portal exploded. Now,
yeah, there you go. It's the portal tied to NIL explosion.
Yeah,
is basically 4 years old. So it's this model is fairly new, and I think universities are like the NC2A because they are the NC2A. This stuff moves like molasses. It just takes a while to move through this process. And I don't think schools are going to come around to where they get together across the board and say, okay, we're collective bargaining now. If you're going to do this, we're going to establish some rules. We're going to establish some structure. and we're going to start the whole collective bargaining. We're going to take back a little bit of decision-making power here and we're going to put some guardrails up here. And right now, you don't have any of that. It's a free-for-all. I mean, as long as it goes with the current transfer portal rules, you're good to go.
I think once the universities start paying these players out of that $23 million pool, I think you're going to start seeing some changes on the way things are. Something has to change, but it's got to be beneficial for the player because they're now getting paid, but it has to be beneficial for the university too. There can be common ground, whether that's a guaranteed 2 years, guaranteed 3 years, because sometimes it's not going to work for either party, right? Because there'll be sometimes coach goes, I don't want that guy.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing that, you go back, I'm going to say like 2 years ago, it looked like there was going to be a little bit of a governor on the engine here, slowing things down when you looked at the numbers of guys going into the transfer portal. And in a given year, you'd see 1,000 guys, 1,300, 1,500 players sitting in the transfer portal, not getting signed. And it's just, at some point you run out of places to go. And I thought that was going to be what sort of slowed things down a bit and was going to make players think twice about jumping into the transfer portal. And I think we saw that for maybe about 1 year. And then NIL really kicked in. And at the same time, too, the other dynamic that played into it was you did see a number of players drop down to lower division schools and get a lot more playing time. And I think that pulled some players out of the transfer portal as well. But it's going to be interesting to see what this 105-player the scholarship or roster limit does, because all of a sudden you can hit the transfer portal. There are way less spots available to land on. And you're going to be dumping, like I said, I think I pointed out that, depending on the school, you're going to be dumping anywhere from 15 to 50 players into the transfer portal for every single school in FBS football. There's going to be a massive flood of players that end up hitting the portal. Now, when I look at Nebraska this given year with White, Knighton, and Cooper leaving, I guarantee you that Gabor, Jamari, Butler, and Williams, those guys are going to go to Florida State. You're going to see them in Seminole uniforms. That's going to happen. Going forward, however, all of a sudden this roster limit's getting crunched down big time. And unless you have a coach leaving to go to another school, keep in mind, it's a little bit of a unique situation that Nebraska's in right now, where you've got the core of a defensive staff leaving en bloc to another school. It's another school in the South where it's warm and weather's nice. That's an easy jump. That's a unique situation. The more common situation going forward is coaches aren't changing and it's just players going to be dumped into the portal every year. Man, if you're on that 105-player roster, if you think you're fairly safe on that roster,
you better stay.
I think it's going to get harder for guys to make that decision to jump into the portal because there's going to be so many fewer spots left. I think it's going to be 1 or 2 years once we hit that 105 limit, which I got to be honest, when does that take effect?
God, is it next year or is it the following year? Let me check.
I thought it was 25, but once that takes effect, I think there's going to be 1 or 2 years where a whole bunch of players keep hopping into the portal like they have the last 2 years, and they're going to be in for a rude awakening where they're going to discover, oh, shit, there's almost a third less landing spots in FBS football for me now.
It will start in the 25-26 academic year.
Okay, so it's this coming year. I think there's going to be a whole bunch of guys who aren't really thinking about it or getting really good advice in regards to that 105-player scholarship limit. And you're going to see a whole slew of people go and jump into the transfer portal and realize there's a about 30% less landing spots for him than there were the previous decade.
Well, and we need to say this too, because it's a reminder, because Ryan Kalkbrenner at Creighton did this last year, right? You can go into the transfer portal and you can pull back out. If your team wants you back, you can come back. You don't have to. Just because you're in there doesn't mean you have to leave. What you're doing is...
And some of these Nebraska players, they might end up coming back out of this. So this might be a deal where we see Gabor back in a Husker uniform. We see Johnson back in a Husker uniform. I'm kind of questioning on the defensive guys because I truly do think they're following Tony and Coach Knighton down to Florida State. But
other news,
but I think a lot of these other guys, you might see some of these other guys back in a Husker uniform next fall.
Other news that happened over the weekend, Scott Frost has landed on his feet. He is going to be the next head coach at Central Florida, so he's going back to really where he got his start. And Rob, I like this. I know people have their feelings about Scott Frost, and I'm not condoning anything he allegedly did at Nebraska or how his tenure ended at Nebraska. I'm glad somebody gets a second shot, and I think he loved it at Central Florida. It was tough for him to leave Central Florida go to Nebraska. I think this makes sense, and I'm happy for him.
I am too. I mean, as a person, I like Scott. I'm not beer drinking. I'm definitely not beer drinking with the guy, but it's one of these things that I think back on, and it's sort of a weird analysis of like, oh my God, how were we that wrong about this guy? Like and I don't mean wrong in the sense of like, this guy was a horrible human being and choice. I don't mean it in that sense, but I think back and at the time it happened, dude, everybody, local people, national pundits, everybody's like, oh my God, talk about a home run hit. I mean, this is a 480-foot blast right here. I mean, everybody thought that this was the greatest hire in history. And I've said it before, my biggest fear when Nebraska hired Frost was that he would do so well that an NFL team was going to come in and stamp him up as no coordinator. That was my worry. And looking back on it, hindsight being 2020, you kind of start looking at the signs. You start talking to a few people who know Scott and are far closer to him than I am. And they'll say exactly what you just said. He really liked Orlando. He liked Central Florida. You got a guy who he does not like the media. True. I saw that as a player both at Stanford, because there was a little bit of a spotlight on him at Stanford. He was
the Bill Walsh protege.
He was a big name. He was a huge recruit for Stanford. And it was Walsh. He was going to be either the next great quarterback or the next Ronnie Lott at safety. He's going to be one of those two things. He hated that. He does not like limelight. He likes to win. He likes being in charge. He likes running the show. He doesn't like a camera in his face. He doesn't like fans clamoring for autographs. It's just, that's not his thing. And he didn't have to deal with that at Central Florida. I remember the story came out that somebody made a comment about, God, it might have been Matt Davison, told a story about how Scott would walk at Central Florida. Scott would walk into the on-campus Chick-fil-A to get lunch, and nobody in the place had any clue who he was.
Wait,
the on-campus one in the student union or whatever. It's just, that's one of those things where there's no way he was ever going to have that at Nebraska. I mean, you go to Central Florida. Do you think when Heupel was there, do you think people knew who Heupel was on campus?
Probably not.
I don't think so.
What I like about this is that it kind of shows you he did not leave there on bad terms. Remember, he finished out the season, won the Peach Bowl, was very gracious towards Central Florida. So, and you and I talked about this last week, that we brought up Scott's name for this job. Now, there were some other local media folks who were like, whoa, could you believe this happened? to me, it made perfect sense because you had former players who were saying, bring back Scott. You had a fan base that said, bring back Scott. So it wasn't that surprising to me that they went after Scott Frost. Now, they allegedly went after Lincoln Riley first and to gauge his interest, and he wanted to stay at USC, which is a better job, and I'm sure he wants to win at USC. But to me, Scott going to Central Florida makes all the sense in the world, and I hope he succeeds in the Big 12. Now, the landscape's a lot different. You have NIL now. You have an athletic department that doesn't have the money a lot of the even current Big 12 schools have. They've invested into facilities, but he still has an uphill climb. He does have Florida, which is a huge advantage, being able to recruit in Florida, but the landscape is even different since he's been out of college football.
It is. Now, the other thing to take into consideration here is that this isn't the AAC. It's the Big 12.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's part of me sits here and goes, okay, well, it's a new Big 12. There's not Oklahoma and Texas. On the flip side, I mean, go ask Iowa State what they think about the new Big 12 right now. It's a tough conference.
Well,
I think it's real football, and you're going to have a whole bunch of teams in there when you look at Arizona and Arizona State and BYU that you've got teams that want to be players on a big stage. And I think the dynamic in the old AAC allowed him to shine.
Yes.
Do I think Central Florida is a good spot for him? Yes. Is it a far better spot than Nebraska was? Yes. Is it going to be tougher at Central Florida now than it was the first time he was there? 100%.
I would agree with that. However, Arizona State was picked to finish last in this year's Big 12 poll. They weren't a very good team a year ago, and they were able to turn it around really quickly and get to the college football playoff. Not saying Central Florida is going to be there, but when you have a state like Florida, the talent that's in Florida, and even the Southeast, there will be a draw there. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. He gets a 5-year contract. Of course, he got $15 million to walk away from Nebraska when he got fired. So money's not really an issue for Scott, and I think he knows that if he wins, the money will come. It'll be interesting to see how long it takes him to turn it around. Go ahead.
Here's my question: what does this do to Nebraska's buyout? Does it affect it?
No, he got $15 million.
So it's $15 million no matter what, even if he takes another head coaching job.
Yep.
God, I should have been a college football coach.
You should have been a college football coach. Barry Odom leaves UNLV to go to Purdue. That's a good hire.
Is that a done deal?
Yeah, it's a done deal.
The last I saw was still in discussion.
No, that's a done deal. That's a good hire by Purdue.
I thought about texting Spreitzer to ask him what his thoughts were on that.
I think he knew that they would be he would be leaving.
I don't think it's a good move.
Really?
I think he was a great fit at UNLV. I think he would have won a lot of games at UNLV over the years. I think he goes to Purdue, and I think this is one of those. I think it's going to be a 3-year experiment like it is with every other coach who's ever gone through Purdue. Is
Purdue the hardest job in the Big Ten? Now, some people would say Northwestern, but I'm starting to think that Purdue is.
The argument for Nebraska.
Now you're gonna piss people off.
Well, okay. Since we've been in the Big Ten, who's our best coach?
Ooh, Bo Pelini.
It's Bo Pelini. Easy. Never had less than 9 wins. Now, granted, he had 4 years in the Big Ten. That was it.
Yeah.
But I mean, our best coach in the Big Ten was Bo Pelini. So it's not an easy conference to win in. And everybody talks about a curse. There's places that it's hard to win in. There's places that it's I don't want to say easy. I think easier to win at. It's easier to move into a Ohio State and win right away. I think it's easier to move into a Florida State, and win right away. It's easier to move into a Michigan or Notre Dame a USC, a Texas, and win right away. It's hard to go to a Nebraska and win right away. It just is. It's hard to get great recruits here. You've got good money. Money's
True.
good. Infrastructure's good. Weather sucks. Campus is okay. It's a middle of the road land grant state university. There's nothing. There's something special about the place. I will say that, but that's not what's going to get great recruits here and great coaches here to win college football games. Ohio State, that's way easier to do. Phoenix, Arizona, why not?
Well,
Why not go to Phoenix, Arizona?
there's some truth to that.
I'm just saying it's Purdue's in that mix of, God, this is not a great college football destination spot. Indiana, Indiana's not an easy place to win at. It's not a great destination spot. I guarantee you right now, Indiana's brass is sitting back and going like, how do we hold on to Signetti?
Well, they signed him to an 8-year contract with $9 million a year. That's how you do it.
You know what the contract, the value of the contract is as thick as that sheet of paper it's written on.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Anybody's hireable, anybody's fireable. It's only as good as the paper it's written on.
What are you doing there? There it is. It's probably a little thicker than that, but the value.
That's it.
The value. The value is the buyout on both sides, right? If you want my coach, you got to pay me. If we fire him, you got to pay him. So that makes sense.
When have you not seen a team able to come up with that money?
Well, I think some teams.
I mean, maybe in terms of firing a guy. I mean, the one that
Mike Norvell.
Norvell, maybe Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, because
those are the two guys that are probably in that category. The thing is with Norvell, though, that has a lot of admin going to him and saying, okay, here's the deal. We got to see some changes. In the span of a month, you saw a new O coordinator, new D coordinator. Both are guys that I think at least now are established. I mean, Gus Malzahn obviously is a pretty established guy in the college football landscape. I think Tony White's a guy that, especially after last year, all of a sudden people were like, God, this guy's a pretty damn good coach. And guess what else? Players like him and assistant coaches like him. Big tangent for you here. Nebraska brings in an analyst on offense. It's Dana Holgerson. Week later, he's the O coordinator for Nebraska. What kind of gets lost in the discussion here, they brought in an analyst on defense too. I don't even know the dude's name, but they brought in an analyst to take a look at what they were doing on defense. How much did that play into Tony White leave?
Maybe a little bit, right?
Him saying like, wait a second, are you questioning me? Like, I got the two best defenses that Nebraska has had in the last decade, basically since Pelini was here. Two best defenses. Statistically, they're the two best defenses Nebraska's had in the last 10 years. And you're going to bring in an analyst to look at what I'm doing. You think that ruffled feathers?
Could have, and maybe a different challenge. I think they were lucky to hang on to Tony White a year ago. And assistant coaches who want to move up are always in flux, right? It's going to be hard to keep a long-standing team together on a coaching staff because you're always about that next professional move until you reach your ultimate goal. And that's why assistant coaches move around a lot.
And I will give you that. I think if you've got a really good assistant coach, that's going to happen. I kind of wonder It seemed like last year there was all this talk about White's leaving. And I think everybody assumed it was going to be for a head coaching job. And all of a sudden it's for a D coordinator's position.
A lateral move at best.
Yeah, although I have a hard time believing this was truly a lateral move. I think there's money there that we're not necessarily seeing. And I think big picture, it's hey, let's go be a major player, Power 5 guy at a couple of different places. Let's do Nebraska for a couple of years. Let's do Florida State for a couple of years. And then we're going to start thinking about that jump to the head coach.
Well, because you come from Syracuse, you got the ACC, now you get the Big Ten, then you go to the ACC. The only thing he needs now is an SEC job, and he'll be complete. Yeah. He'll be complete.
And there's ACC and there's different ACC. I mean, and I'll admit, like, SMU jumped to the 4 in the ACC. I think that kind of surprised everybody. But I mean, there's Clemson, Miami, Florida State ACC, and then there's Syracuse,
Virginia Tech,
North Carolina State, Virginia Tech ACC. There's a couple of different ACCs here that we're talking about, and I think Florida State this year notwithstanding, this was a horrible year. I totally get it, but big picture wise, I think Florida State's a player in the ACC, and if ACC ever does implode, Florida State's going to end up in the Big Ten or the SEC, and maybe that's something that Tony White's looking at again, and maybe we ought to be looking at that going like, what's happening at Florida State? Are they actually going to make a jump to a different conference here? I wonder if this is a bit of a harbinger of that.
Before we wrap up today's podcast, the volleyball team onto the Sweet 16. They rolled this weekend in Lincoln. No surprise there, but it gets tougher now, right? It gets tough. And your niece's Arizona State team got beat.
Oh, that was a tough one. We watched that last night. So A&M's that have resumes in terms of what's your record versus what's your strength of schedule. That's A&M in a nutshell in college volleyball. They're one of those teams that their record, I think they were like 20-7 coming into the NC2As, which is, you like on the surface, you're like, that's not that good. I think they were 10-2 or 11-2 against NC2A tournament teams. That's one of those teams that passes the eyeball test. When Arizona State had and you know what? I think that's the nature of playoffs, unfortunately. Arizona State probably had a little bit of an off night. They were a 30-2 team coming into last night. And that's an amazing season, Big 12 champs. So amazing season for Arizona State. They hit a team that was on a roll, had a great night. Their 2-star players were nailing everything. Sometimes that happens. It's the nature of playoff sports. That's why I like playoff sports and think we need to expand this.
All right. He's Dr. Rob Zatechka. I'm Travis Justice. Make sure to give this video a like, leave a comment if you liked or didn't like something that we had to say, and of course subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for your holiday gift, make sure to either go to Husker Hounds at 2 locations or get your pair of G-Defy shoes 50% off right now by using the promo code DocTalk50 at checkout at gdefy.com. That's GDEFY.com. Dr. Rob wears the shoes. I wear the shoes. You're going to love them. 50% off. And
I'm buying another pair at 50% off. And
don't forget, you get 60 days, right? You can wear them for 60 days, and if you don't like them, which we think you're going to love them, you can send them back, get your money back. So it's that simple. For Dr. Rob Zatechka, I'm Travis Justice. We will talk to you next week on the Doc Talk Podcast.